Hello and welcome to Koru Education's News Roundup, part of our sort of podcast offering. And I am delighted to be joined by Ceilidh, my co-host in this. And today we will be talking about a really serious topic. You can see on the screen there that we've got Shine a Light on Suicide. Today is National Suicide Prevention Day in the UK. And the screen that you can see is a charity that offer free online suicide prevention training. I'd urge you to check these people out. Their links will be on the podcast at the beginning and the end. But there's a variety of issues that we would like to talk about today, and perhaps some of the things that may help schools make things better for the children in their care. So welcome, Ceilidh. Thanks for joining us today.
No, thank you. Welcome. Yep. Happy to be here. Even though it is a very, a very tricky subject area that we will delve into today.
Yeah, and I think it's probably important to point out that neither myself nor Ceilidh are putting ourselves forward as experts in this area at all. We just felt that it was a poignant and serious issue to be talking about on this day. So this is one of the articles that in the news roundup. The idea behind the podcast news round is that we pick out some articles from the past fortnight and we just chat about the merit or otherwise of those articles. Some of them are in the Times Ed, some of them are in the BBC. They can come from anywhere. And if you have any suggestions for us to talk about on the podcast, do send them through to us. info@korueducation.uk. We'd love to hear from you. That would be fabulous. So, Ceilidh, this article about the Commissioner demanding plans for pupils needing support. Dame Rachel D'Souza looking for support plans for pupils who are not meeting expected standards. Talk to me a little bit about this and what your thoughts are.
So this is a really interesting one because the headline is quite clickbaity for me, because there's a lot in there that I'm like, yes, support, yes, demanding. I love it when people go out and demand stuff. Makes me feel like stuff is happening. And then I read the article and I was a little disquieted by some of the things that I mentioned in here. So as the title kind of suggests, we've got this call for support plans, and kind of what her ideas are about who requires these extra support plans, and whether the IEPs of old or the EHCPs of now are the best way of supporting pupils with SEND and any other need. This is part of a whole kind of movement that's going to be happening. We're awaiting a white paper that will come through at some point in the next couple of months. But there are a couple of things in here that make me feel a bit ick.
I would probably share that view. I have a little bit of a view about IEPs and EHCPs and all of that kind of special needs diagnoses and things like that. I kind of think all children have got individual particular needs, and that as schools and as teachers, we should be meeting those irrespective of what they are and how they present. It's a little bit of a utopian view, and I recognize that I don't face 4 or 5 classes a day of 20, 25 children, plus games on a Friday and that sort of thing. But perhaps that's the point. Perhaps that's it. Perhaps it is about the workload on teachers, that maybe we wouldn't need the formality and the structure if we had a little bit more space and time to maneuver and work with relationships.
Yes, and I think that is a very, I love your utopian kind of idealistic kind of view on it. I go back to my very first couple of years as a teacher in the UK, and being handed these IEPs. And in our school we did it slightly differently. So we had little exercise books that were of a particular color that had to be on display in our classrooms at all times and had to be updated weekly. And I remember as an NQT being absolutely terrified of this and not really having enough time because I felt like I was drowning. And it wasn't until the Senko sat down and said, look, these are legally binding. These children have a legal right to better access to get to the education they need. This is a legal document, and you need to be updating them. Like this is because it's their right. It concerns me that in this article, one of the things that comes up is that there will be so many different types of IEPs, EHCPs, and it does appear like that all students will be eligible for them. That's not to say that I don't want to care for all students, but where do we then stand legally? And as a teacher being in charge of this, it just seems like an impossible task. I don't know how you feel there, Chris.
My opinion is that I think there's a temptation for politicians, managers, leaders, bureaucrats to seek to regulate things to solve problems because they're the ones that are responsible and they need something tangible to point at. And I genuinely believe that the value for pupils comes from the relationship with the teachers that are looking after them. And I wonder if maybe even counterintuitively, if perhaps some bureaucrats, civil servants, politicians and so forth could maybe rein back a little and give teachers the room to have that relationship. I recognize that's a resource choice, but ultimately a child is going to feel better when they have a conversation with a teacher that's productive. They're not going to feel better because they've got the red book up to date on in the folder. And I think that we often miss the point with that. We regulate with good intent, and we draw the time, expertise, resilience away from the teacher and the pupil towards the teacher and the compliance. And I think that's often a mistake. Some of the best work that I've done has been in that intangible space that hasn't been accounted for. Just a conversation with a pupil that's struggling.
For sure. And I think, the backdrop to this is this head teachers, consensus that said, or school leaders saying that, funding, attendance, and, SEN outcomes are hugely concerning. I am not sure that regulating the support plans is actually a good response to educational leaders saying we're really struggling with these things, because it's kind of counterintuitive. It's going to put more emphasis on the paperwork and less on giving students what they need.
Yeah, and I was a little troubled by the recent commitment by Bridget Phillipson to continue, if not step up, the move towards fining parents for students that don't attend. That seems to me unduly punitive and not necessarily that constructive in terms of solving the problem around why those pupils aren't attending. And actually it's kind of forcing an issue through, and I just feel as if reading this and thinking about that sort of mindset, that perhaps there's a move towards compulsion rather than resolution.
Yeah, I agree. I think we now have lots of research coming out there about anxiety related absence, and about how that is often kind of researched from a SEND perspective, but this is quite important, and I think something that will come up in the next articles that we're about to look at.
I think it would be fair to say that we're both a little bit uncomfortable with where this is at, and the mood music, if you like, say, coming out of the UK government at the moment around these issues, regulate and grasp harder rather than trust teachers to do what they need to do.
For sure, 100%. Yeah, gave me the ick.
Interestingly enough, there was this story about school bonding, and it's rooted in the US. For clearly attendance is an issue that exists elsewhere not just in the UK. And I think it was Caroline Gentle Ginetti explains how to focus on school bonding. What are your thoughts on this, on school bonding as a solution, a resolution?
I'm not a huge fan of the term school bonding. I feel like we could do something different with that title. However, in this article there were loads of things that that did resonate. Being a teacher, and in our last podcast I think I talked about connection over correction. And I think this is something where we really can, if given the space and the time and the mental load resources as teachers who are out there to do the best for children, we can make a big difference. I think that the article talks about students reporting feeling unheard, uncared for, there being a big parental and student divide between their school life and their home life, and that's been reported on for a number of years. This is not something new. I mean, PISA recorded this 3 years ago now, that in the UK and the US, student life satisfaction in terms of their schooling is at an all-time low. I think the UK was like 70 out of 73 in terms of like student life satisfaction. And some of these things that they bring up about making strong relationships and strong bonds is really important to get our youth re-engaged with school.
Yeah, and I think that ties into some of the points that we raised before, that if a student, like anybody, I think we can even ditch the concept that this is peculiar to schools. I think if you go to work and you feel a sense of belonging, you feel a sense of purpose, and you feel like you've got some value to give, then it becomes a healthy place for you to be. If you don't feel overworked, and you feel as if you're able to cope with the work that's put in front of you, then again, it feels like a healthy place to be, and you engage in a positive fashion. And I think we often make a false distinction between the very human needs of youngsters and the very human needs of adults. And the two kind of run broadly in a similar fashion.
For sure. There was a hashtag that I saw on Instagram about a week ago, which was Maslow before Bloom. Right. And this idea that you have to have all your needs met before you can start, doing all the other stuff. And I mean, school bonding, relationship creation is in there. It's in your safety. So it is absolutely important. And I feel like that this article had a few things that were quite useful.
But here's a question. How do you create that school bonding if you've got a curriculum to get through and you've got so many things to do in the meantime? You've got to have your red books all signed off and legally compliant. You start to prioritize the things that get measured rather than the stuff that doesn't as a teacher. And I can hear people that are listening to the podcast, hopefully, teachers thinking, this is a great idea, and leaders thinking, how can I square that particular circle? I don't have the resources to do it. And I think that very often it does come down to a resource choice. A
resource choice, a managerial choice. And at this point, I think our teachers are the experts. And I think if you were to sit down and say, no, do you know what? My feedback, feed up, feed forward, whatever you're doing, that the senior management are looking at, is looking a little behind this week. Let me tell you about all the conversations that I had. I think we need to be promoting this from the ground upwards, and that's really hard when you're the frog in the pot and it is boiling and you are drowning. But we know that connection and relationship is the most important. And if you're a head teacher out there, your staff are your most valuable asset. They're worth more than your school building, your computers, your iPads, everything else put together. And the best way that they can make a difference is to connect with those kiddos. That should come first.
Yeah, give them the space to do that.
100%.
Yeah. Okay. I can hear all of the head teachers just tuning out of our podcast as we
Oh
say.
no. We ruined
Okay.
it.
I think, to be fair, we probably all recognize that sense of belonging is an important part of well-being and an important part of a positive relationship. We've talked about some of the problems, so let's head into some of the potential solutions that go well beyond just simple resourcing. So head teachers, do stay with us, please.
Yes, please do.
This was an article that you brought to my attention today.
Yes.
It's published at 6 a.m. this morning, so I've got limited insight. I'm going to throw this one over to you to talk us through this.
Right. So I really liked this idea. Now, I know that this is not new. I mean, the idea of having a pastoral time throughout the week is not, particularly new. When I was at school, we did PSHE classes, in secondary school, and that was that time when we were supposed to connect with a teacher and these things. But my feeling was that, as the kind of the subtitle here says, it's a proper time for check-ins. Now, we've talked a little bit on this podcast about how the curriculum and our time and everything is so full that often teachers don't have the time or the space or the capacity, the resources to do that's little but daily, that drip, drip, drip relationship building that we know makes a big difference. My feeling was that if you state it as a part of the curriculum, then it automatically has time and space allocated to it. A bit like in my diary, in my calendar, I have to block out times to do certain jobs, because otherwise it'll be like on my to-do list for weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks. But if I set a half an hour, this is the time in my calendar in which I'm going to blah, 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 it gets done. And actually, if we gave students and teachers 45 minutes, which was not, to be planned, to be lesson prepped, to be accountable, to the powers above with, a full, plan of what you were going to do. But if you gave students and teachers the time to just have connections, you would see well-being improve. This was how I kind of took a lot of this article. You had a completely different reaction.
Well, I think that downtime is important, and I think that if you can create that space for people to use, I think that's massively valuable. And as you've gone through that, I'm with you, and I'm totally on board with that. I think the temptation would be as a academic head within a school would be to want that time filled up with stuff, want it planned, want materials, rather than just having conversations that might exist appropriately within that. And I think that's the real danger. We're so conditioned to looking for accountability for all, that we tend to step away from those intangibles, and this is possibly a good way of creating that space and that for pupils as well as teachers. Absolutely. I was really interested in the final article, and this was on the BBC, and I love the picture with this, the smiles and so forth. Meet the 3-year-olds helping anxious teens spend more time in school. So what was going on with this, and how is it working, and what do you think of this? Is this something you would recommend that a school introduced?
This really warmed my heart. I have to say, when I was looking through all the things that we could possibly talk about today, and I was thinking it was a bit doom and gloom, this was the one that I was like, you know what, we need to talk about this a little bit. I think it's really important for our kids to work with people outside of the school, and whether that's like an intergenerational thing where you work with a local nursing home. I mean, studies have shown that's super good for all people involved, or whether you work with littlies and you get these teenagers working alongside nursery schools. I think it's a win-win-win for everyone. Yeah. The teenagers in this article were talking a lot about how they felt like they had something to offer, something to give, that they were like the expert in this situation, and it really helped them with a real outcome. working with these little ones, and I just think that's a really beautiful thing. And yeah, I think it should and could happen much more often.
Yeah, I would really encourage this. I think you're right about that outreach that goes beyond your own school gates. I think that the integration with the community is always good. I think for children who are often told that they need to develop, they need to grow, they need to improve, I think having that moment in the sun where they're the expert, where they have the value that's being shared, I think that's fundamental to the human spirit, let alone anything else. And I see this, and I've seen it and used it in a very different context, but in a similar sort of thread. I was housemaster of a boarding house outside of the UK, and it was the boarding house of the naughty boys at the school. Could I say that? They were unbeaten on the sports field. They were really good athletes, but behavior-wise, they presented some challenges that the other boarding houses didn't really. And what we did was we got them coaching sport for other groups, and it had a similar sort of impact. It took them, they knew that they were the naughty boys, but it took them away from that title, and it turned them into something else, and it gave them that sense of self-worth, and they were no longer living up to the bad rep, they were living up to the good rep, and so on. And it was a really healthy perspective for them to have. So slightly different context, very different context, but same fundamental human value.
Yeah, same outcome, same bonding experience, same sense of like real, actual, tangible achievement. And I think it all comes back to the same thing. It comes back to like real human connection, and whether we get that through charitable programs like this, or potentially through a support and care plan, it doesn't really matter how we get there, as long as that is kind of where we're heading towards, I think.
Yeah, I guess the message in that is that schools don't need government to make the decisions. Schools can just do it.
I would love that to be a thing.
Well, listen, I think to sort of sum up the things that we've talked about today, they've all really been focused on making children feel better, and if they feel better, they're going to get more out of their time at school. And perhaps some of those that are really in crisis might seek the help that they really need, and maybe it will avoid some of the tragedies that do happen. Please do take a moment to look up at the Shining a Light on Suicide website and 100%. Take advantage of that free training, anyone that's listening to this. Ceilidh, a pleasure as always. We'll do another roundup in a fortnight.
Yep. See you then.
Thanks now. Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye-bye.